Meet you after a long time.
Yes, it's been a while. I could see the crowd there at the conference for a moment. It looks nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a large hall room and there are lots of people on site. I'm online too. I'm at this moment in Japan, so.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're online from a totally different time zone as well. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, thank you so much for your acceptance, and I mean, we'll enjoy your talk soon. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was fun for me to put this talk together and get it organized because it's work we're doing currently, and I wanted to get it all straight in my head anyway. And the best way to get it in your head correctly is to try to explain it.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Fayaz sir, assalamu alaikum.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I'm talking just one of the session chairs, Professor Fayaz Khan, Vice Chancellor of the University. Yeah. এই সেশনে ভলান্টিয়ার কে? কারণ টাইম হয়ে গেছে, স্পিকার চলে আসছেন প্লাস
আতিক ভাই আমি একটু কানেক্ট করছিলাম ওখান থেকে।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা,
আরেকজনের সাথে।
ওকে ওকে,
তুমি ট্রাই করছি, otherwise we will start within 2 minutes.
Okay.
Now, do I share screen when we start, after we start?
You can start, I mean, you can share your screen, I hope no problem. Yeah. Just they are trying to connect with the on-site and online both together, so yes. That's why, because just finished the previous event, which is award ceremony for the idea contest, and 2 ministers or state ministers were there. So lots of people, so yeah, this is what I heard now from the one of the chairs.
Yeah, it looks like I can go into screen sharing without any trouble.
Yeah. You can keep it sharing, no problem, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Faisal Khan. Faisal, are you here? Faiz Khan sir, are you here? Professor Abu Tahir sir, are you here?
This is Fayaz Khan, sorry.
Fayaz Khan sir, sorry.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we can start if you give permission. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hello, everyone. On behalf of IC4IR Organizing Committee, I am Shamim Kaisar, would like to welcome all of you to this keynote session. So in this session, Professor Fayaz Khan and Professor Abu Taher with us as session chair, and the speakers are Professor Kevin Bauer and Professor Saiful Rahman. I would like to request our session chair to cover the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shamim, and welcome, Professor Kevin Bauer. And also, I see, hello, how are you? And I see Professor Atikur Rahman Ahad. I think he's joining from Japan, I guess. And yeah, and my best wishes to all other participants. So first of all, let me introduce Professor Bauer. The topic he will be presenting today is Want Smarter Deep CNN, Train It Using Human Salience. About Professor Bauer, he's a fellow of American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is abbreviated as AAAS, and has greatly contributed to the field of computer vision, pattern recognition, biometrics, object recognition, and data science. As fellow of IEEE, his main contribution is developing algorithm to recognize objects in images, and his contribution in the field of pattern recognition and biometrics is also worth mentioning here. For his contribution in the same field, he has received IEEE Biometric Council Meritorious Service Award. Professor Bauer is currently Editor-in-Chief of IEEE Transactions on Biometrics, Behavior, and Identity Science. He's serving as General Chair of the 2021 IEEE Winter Conference on Applications of Computer Visions. Currently, he is serving as Director of College of Engineering as International Program at the University of Notre Dame. So I hand over the floor to Professor Bauer to present his presentation. Professor Bauer, you have 35 to 40 minutes time for your presentation, and there will be 5 to 10 minutes time for question and answers. So over to Professor Bauer.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the chance to speak to the conference today. So I want to thank the conference organizers. I also noticed the list of invited speakers, and I saw Matt Turk's name and Mark Nixon's name and other names that I recognize. So I am challenged and I hope that I do a good job for you today and give you something interesting to think about. So the work that I'm going to talk about is not all my own work, of course. My colleagues Adam Shaika and Aidan Boyd are the people that I've been doing this work with, and Aidan will be graduating with his PhD from Notre Dame sometime in the next year or so. As I start this talk, I want to sort of set the tone or give a context to the problem area that we're talking about. And this slide is meant to do that. The images in the top row are pictures of the eye, and in particular, we're interested in the iris region of the eye. And in the top row, none of the eyes are wearing contact lenses, but in the bottom row, all three of them are. And I want you to imagine that you have the task right now of coming up with an algorithm for yourself in your head to distinguish between images that are wearing contact lenses and images that are not. And if I tell you to do that, you're probably looking at the images, and maybe you understand that there's the pupil there and the iris there and the sclera there, and you see bits of eyelash, and you're looking around, and maybe you figured out that this person is probably wearing mascara, but it may be hard for you to figure out how to do the recognition. If I say to you, for those image pair on the far left, I want you to look carefully at the region of the image on the border of the iris and into the sclera, and I sort of highlight those example areas for you. Maybe you get a hint of what you want to look for. If I say, you know, in the middle column, again, I want you to look at the region of the image on the border between the iris and the sclera. Maybe you begin to see a common feature that you can focus on. And if I do that again for the third example, I say, you know, really the place to look at to make your decision here is on the region where the iris and the sclera come together and around there. And so if you're focusing on a particular subset of the images, maybe it becomes easier, and maybe you figured it out as I'm speaking. You can kind of see the edge of the contact lens going there, and the edge of the contact lens going there, and the edge of the contact lens going there. And once you've realized what you're seeing, then probably you have an idea of how to approach the problem and where the information is, and you feel much more confident about it. At least I hope that's been the effect of this example. And the point of this is to have in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of the talk that an apparently very difficult visual information processing task can be made much easier if you have hints on where to look in the image, if you have hints about where the salient regions are in the image, where the information is in order to make the decision, solve the problem that you're asked to solve. So keep that in mind, and we'll go on with the rest of the talk and come back to that. So this is a roadmap for the talk. We're going to start off saying a little bit about iris recognition, because I'm guessing that that's not a topic that the entire set of attendees at the conference is already familiar with. So we'll sort of give you a quick definition of iris recognition, a quick definition of the problem of presentation attack detection, which is sort of a computer security problem embedded within iris recognition. We'll talk about the concept of open set iris presentation attack detection, which is kind of this state-of-the-art thought in how to measure whether or not you have solved this problem in a practical way. Then we'll sort of switch over and talk about human ability to do iris presentation attack detection. And then we'll end up at the largest of the 5 parts mentioned here. How do we use human ability at a task to train a better CNN, right? And I'll argue at the end that this, even though we've talked about it in the terms of iris recognition, that this approach to making a better CNN is fully general to a large class of problems. Okay, our first stop along our stroll today. This is an iris image of the type that commercial iris recognition sensors use. It's 480 by 640. It's been acquired in near-infrared illumination, and the sensors are made to acquire the image under controlled conditions of distance of the sensor to the eye, the amount of light, and the quality of focus of the image. And one image like this can be turned into, after you've found the iris region here and done some texture analysis on it and created a code for this iris, one image like this can be turned into a personal identifier that allows a 1 in 1 million false match rate with just a 2 or 3% false non-match rate. That combination of performance. So if I wanted to enter a secure room that was protected by iris recognition, I would have only a 2 or 3% chance that it would not let me in when I should get in. And if someone else was trying to get in by pretending to be me, you would need a line of 1 million people, right, to have someone get in as me. So this combination of error rates was controversial when iris recognition was first introduced, and has become accepted as normal or standard or easily achievable now, and has caused people to implement, achieve, and think about all sorts of large-scale iris recognition problems. So John Dogman is this gentleman here. This is a picture of a stroll around Cambridge, UK one day. John is known as the father of iris recognition. His patent in 1991 has been referenced any number of times, and multiple of his papers have been referenced. And he, for a decade or more, was the only or the prime force pushing this technology. So he really went around and convinced people over a period of time that this technology really would do what he claimed it would do. And John was given for a long time to say things about the potential of the technology that many of us, and I'll put myself in the category as well, until we did some experiments in our lab and verified things, made statements that people might have thought were skeptical. Statements like the binomial cumulative from 0 to just 0.3 is 1 in 10 billion, or roughly the planetary number of human eyes, implying that this technology would enable individual identification of everyone on the planet, right? And that sounds so amazing when you hear it. And there are many practical problems to be encountered, but this is something that has become more reasonable or more thinkable over time as people have seen applications delivered and seen the performance from them. So the Unique Identification Authority of India has for a long time been the thing that was pointed to prove that iris recognition could be done at enormous scale in a practical way. And I pulled a plot here from the Aadhaar Authority website in November 2021, just last month. 1.3 billion persons enrolled in the Unique ID program, which is powered, I'd say the primary biometric engine is a pair of images of the two eyes. They also do fingerprint and face, but for much of the early time of Aadhaar, I think the technical observers said that the presence of iris recognition was fundamental to the system being able to move forward. Now, even also recently, even more ambitious and perhaps crazy sounding startups are coming along. And one of them I've highlighted here called WorldCoin. Their idea is even more literally everyone on the planet be enrolled in a economic system. They plan to give a small amount of cryptocurrency to everyone and enroll people in the system by scanning both irises in order to determine individual by individual each enrollment in the WorldCoin economic system. And the thought is that they can revolutionize economics by getting everybody participating in cryptocurrency. So this is a startup that really does exist, really is enrolling people with a dual iris enrollment, and really is giving them a tiny amount of the cryptocurrency that's wrapped up in this. And this may seem crazy, but there are people with substantial experience in startups and in machine learning, and people with a substantial amount of money who are putting into this to see what can be made. So literally, global identifier, right? So the whole point of that quick summary of the history and potential of iris recognition is simply to say that iris recognition has powered some and will power some additional extreme ideas of universal, that is everybody, unique identification. Now, the next topic I want to come into is presentation attack detection, what it is and why it's important, and why it's important to have good solutions to it. The presentation attack problem is, given the image, can you tell me if it's bona fide? That means it's a live iris presented to use the system honestly, or it's an attack image, meaning an image presented to cause the system to make an error, or that it has the potential for the system to make an error. Now, I quibble a little bit with the standard definition of these terms having the word intention in it, because when we think of the intention of the person, it's sometimes hard to classify it in the binary sort of way. But let's talk about some of the possible motivations for attack. And let's start actually for the moment with create a virtual identity. You know, if I could present images or irises or models of iris to the sensor for WorldCoin, and I could enroll myself once and then put on glasses or put in contact lenses or hold up a picture in front of the sensor and make a second enrollment, well, then WorldCoin would have given me, one person, 2 of their units of WorldCoin. And if I could do 2, then maybe I could do 2,000 or 200,000, and I could create a fraud on the system by having more virtual identities and getting multiple benefits to myself. So being able to tell that a given presentation to the iris sensor is a unique person, a unique live person, is important. Evading being recognized. One of the early applications of iris recognition was in the United Arab Emirates, where if people were sent away from the country, guest workers were sent away, their iris images were taken, they were put on a watch list, and all of the workers coming back in were checked against it. So if you had been thrown out of the country before, you wouldn't be able to get back in. If you pretended to be someone different this time, so you wouldn't match your old enrollment, you might be able to get back in. So you might have the motivation to change your appearance to evade being recognized and be able to get back in. You might choose to impersonate a particular person who has some sort of security clearance or access that you want. You might want to create an identity that you share with others so that 4 or 5 people can pretend at different times to be the same virtual identity. And I put a ... here because the longer things go on and the more applications are created and the more money that's involved in those applications, the greater the chance that the bad guys will think of yet another way of using misusing iris recognition. So as an example for you right now to think about, one of these 2 iris images is of a person wearing a textured contact lens. And by the phrase textured contact lens, I mean the kind of lens I would put in if I wanted to have blue eyes or green eyes, or I wanted to have some strange pattern on my eye because it was a holiday or something like that. One of these images is wearing a textured contact lens and one is not. If I was there in front of you and saw a room full of people, I would ask you to raise your hand if you knew which one. I've given you a few seconds here as I'm speaking. This is the image where the person is wearing a textured contact lens. One of the giveaways that you might remember from the start of the talk, you can see the edge of the contact lens there on the sclera. Around the iris, you can sort of tell that the texture has a funny quality to it that looks a little bit artificial. This is an eye that has no contact lens. You can see there's a little bit of makeup on the eye, so this is probably a woman. But the textured contact lens here covers up the natural iris texture that you would see in a normal image. And if you had enrolled this person into a watch list when they had no textured contact lens in, and they walked up with a textured contact lens, their new image would not match their old image, and you would not know that they were not supposed to get in. They would be able to, for example, go back into the United Arab Emirates, even though they had been thrown out in the past. Now, the problem of coming up with computer algorithms to tell attack images from bona fide images is an important academic and practical industry problem. I think most companies do not have the level of presentation attack detection that they would like to have yet. And the people working in the area in research are still working in the area and see the problem as very difficult. And I'll illustrate that for you in a moment. What I've pulled out here to show you how active this research area is, there's a competition that's done every 2 or 3 years. There's 2013, 15, 17, and 2020 here. And you can tell the number of researchers working collaboratively in an evaluation of algorithms for this problem has grown to include a number of countries, a number of research groups, and large data sets, even though I'm going to show you an example of an even larger data set in a moment, large data sets and open source codes for solving the problem at the current level of performance. So this is an important presentation attack detection is an active research topic in biometrics and security. I've been talking about it in the context of iris, but it applies to fingerprint, face, any sort of biometric identification mode you would use. You want to be able to detect when someone is presenting a sample that would cause the system to make an error. Okay, I want to go now to talking about the concept of open set presentation attack detection and why that is the correct way of thinking about the problem in a security context. So the presentation attack detection problem is to distinguish a real iris image, a live image of an iris being presented in a way to use the system correctly, against an attack. But we want to recognize that attack isn't one homogeneous class of things. It's many different classes of things. It's different ways of trying to fool the biometric system. So a textured contact lens is one way of an attack on the system. A synthetic iris image, where you generate the image by graphics techniques, is a different way of trying to attack the system. Printing out an image of someone else's iris and holding it up for the system to take a picture of, a paper printout, would be another way. Certain medical conditions will break the segmentation step for the image processing for iris recognition and allow the person to enroll an infinite number of times. And so those have to be detected. People wearing prosthetic eyes need to be detected. The printout, the combination of textured contact lenses and paper printout, because it presents a different combination of qualities, could be regarded as yet a different type of attack. And the use of an iris image from a person who is no longer alive could be considered another type of attack. And so the idea that attack is not a monolithic or a single kind of things, but it's many different kinds of things trying to break the system in different ways, needs to be thought about, because you're interested in what your system will do when the bad guys come up with a kind of attack you haven't seen before. So historically, as the field developed, everyone was doing closed set evaluation. I mean, we took all of our attack images, we randomized them, and we broke them up into training and test. But all of the attack types that we knew about were present in the test data and in the training data. Open set is a more structured way of thinking about things, where when you train the machine learning system, you leave all of the examples of one type of attack out, and you train on all but one, and then test on the one that's left out and cycle through the different types. Open set is much more rigorous and realistic and will give lower performance numbers than closed set, but it's mimicking what happens in reality. It's mimicking what the bad guys are going to do. So the idea is that we'll train the system using some bona fide images and maybe images of the first 6 attack types, but we'll leave out post-mortem. After we've trained the system, we'll test on post-mortem. Then we'll train a version of the system again on bona fide and the first 5, leave out printouts of contacts and use post-mortem, and then evaluate on printouts and sort of rotate through the different attack types that we know today in order to get an idea of what our system might be doing in terms of the next attack type that we haven't seen yet, the thing that the bad guys are going to come at us with in the future. So I'm going to give you the results of an open set evaluation protocol in IrisPad. It's following this leave one attack type out evaluation, which is the state of the art in how to think about this. I'm going to give you results for radically different amounts of training data being available. We assembled a data set of about 460,000 images, which represents the union of all the different research data sets that are readily available, publicly available to the research community, with the 7 different attack types that I showed you earlier. And then we have a small subset of that containing only 765 images, which can be smoothed at different levels to do some augmentation to get some number times 765 of images for training. And we're going to use the DNet, which is a version of DinSnet, CNN architecture, customized for presentation attack detection with standard parameter settings on it. And so this is the kind of ROC curves we would get as results. This is for the particular one of the 7 cases where the printed images are the left out attack type, and we're training on everything else except the printout of contact lenses. So we've left both of the printout versions out. And this is the ROC curve that we get for telling attack types for telling printout from non-printout based on training on the non-printout images. If we have lots of data available, we get a 0.93 ROC curve. The perfect ROC curve would go straight up to the upper left corner and across, but that 0.93 is pretty good. But with a small amount of data, we get a fairly poor performance, right? So no printout images and training or validation, only in test. If we look across the different types of attack as the left one out, well, the post-mortem images are easy to learn on when you have lots of data. They're quite hard when you have a small amount of data. The prosthetic, the fake eye in the eye socket is easy if you've got lots of data, very hard if you've got a small amount of data. Synthetic is kind of easy, very hard if you have a small amount of data, and you see the difference between large. And some of them are like detecting textured contact lenses or printouts, printed pages of someone wearing a textured contact lens is very difficult regardless of whether you have a large amount of data or a small amount of data. So open set presentation attack detection is a very challenging problem in biometrics and security. What this slide tells us is that if the bad guys are thinking of an attack type that's as challenging as contact lenses, then what we've got currently is going to be very poor as a detection system, regardless of whether we have a large or a small amount of data to detect it. Okay. I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about human ability to solve this problem that we've been talking about. We'll spend just a moment on this. We did some experiments where we had 150 people look at iris images, an average of just under 30 apiece, and tell us whether they thought the image was bona fide or one of the attack types, or they couldn't tell. If they were able to make a decision, bona fide or attack, we asked them to annotate regions of the image that support their decision or gave them the information they needed to make their decision. We ended up with 765, and now you know where that unusual number comes from that you've been seeing a couple slides back. We ended up with 765 images that were correctly classified by at least one person and have annotations on them. And we looked at the accuracy of people classifying the images, and for bona fide images, they were getting 56% of the bona fide images presented to them classified as bona fide. For textured contact images, they were getting 65% of those as an attack, not necessarily this specific type of attack. And for paper printouts, for postmortem, they were doing really well. For textured and printout, quite well. So people have reasonable but not great ability to tell all of the attack types. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard, but people have some ability, and these were non-experts, even non-expert people have some ability to solve this problem. So now we want to use the fact that we know humans can solve the problem at some level of competence, and that we can ask them for information about how they solved the problem or what they were looking at when they solved the problem in order to train a CNN to better solve the problem. So here's an example of one of the images we asked people to look at that was correctly classified by 5 different observers. And each of these 5 saliency maps is where an observer who classified this image correctly as an attack image. This is a prosthetic eye. This is the map of annotations where someone took the cursor and said, you know, I was looking at this and this and this and this, and that's what convinced me how to categorize this image. So we've got 5 different people who gave different annotations for what they were looking at in this image when they correctly classified it. We can sort of put those together and say, okay, where everyone agreed is kind of the hottest place in the heat map. And we can see that there are some places like that. And then where no one marked it is sort of a cold place in that heat map. And this represents the strength or consistency of salience for people looking at this image and deciding what category it belongs in. And now I'm going to talk about doing something kind of strange with that information. I can take the original image, I can take the salience map, which is representing how consistently a region was said by people who classified the image correctly to be important to that decision. And I can blur the image at different levels, no blur where everyone agreed it was important, and really strong blur where everyone agreed that region was not important. And I get this version, blurring by the lack of salience of this original image. And you can see that some parts of it are preserved and other parts are smoothed rather heavily. And you're probably wondering, why is he doing that? Well, we're going to ask a rather unusual question about the training process for neural networks. Normally, neural networks are trained on the original images or maybe intentionally blurred or repositioned versions of them to augment the data. But they're not trained on images like this, where we have selectively blurred the information according to how humans tell us they visually process the image. So this approach you should think of as, we're going to selectively blur training images so that the regions that are less salient to people get stronger blur, and that in relative terms, that's going to increase the network's emphasis on the salient regions. So now I'm going to take the small training set, the kind of results you've already seen, the original images augmented by 8 different blurred versions where the blur is consistent over the whole image. And I'm going to leave out an attack type, or I'm going to take 8 saliency blurred images, saliency blurred versions of each of the 765 images. And these are going to represent complete data or original data where people think it is most important in the image, and totally blurred data where they think it isn't. For the validation data, I'm using just original images, no blurring of any kind. And for the test data, I'm using just original images, and we're going to do the attack, we're going to do the leave one attack type out style of training and testing. So our traditional training is 765 original images plus 8 blurred versions. Our salience blur, our human aided training, is going to be 765 images, each of 8 different salience blurred versions, testing out for the strength of the salience that the network is going to choose. We're going to have the same 8 blur levels here, but they're used selectively here across the whole image here, and the same initialization, the same validation, the same test data. So if we have printouts as the left out attack type, and we apply and compare these 2 methods of training, a deep CNN, one thing you'll notice, for the training data, the accuracy goes very quickly, less than 10 epochs to nearly perfect, and it stays there. Well, that's what neural networks do. They memorize the training data to some degree. If I think of the traditional method of training the neural network, that is on the original images and some uniformly blurred versions of the original images, the accuracy goes to something just barely above random, and it stays there, right? If I think of training on the selectively blurred versions of the images and not having the original images available any longer, so the network has access only to images that have been blurred according to human salience, the accuracy starts off much higher and slowly improves over time. So this gap in the validation accuracy in the training process of the network represents the gain by transforming the training data to reflect what humans think is salient in the image. The network is clearly learning a radically different model for the problem when you have blurred the data according to notions of human salience, a radically different and radically better version of the problem. And that's true regardless of which of the left one out attack types we are working on. And that carries over to the left one out attack type. These are the ROC curves for the left one out attack type. This is using the normal training process. This is using the new human saliency coded version of the training images. And we get almost the accuracy gain by coding just the 765 images that we would get out of a much larger amount of data, right? So we're able to use fewer instances and get faster and more accurate training. And that holds true over most of the different attack types. We get huge gains for postmortem, disease, and synthetic. We get smaller gains for prosthetic, contacts, and contacts plus printout by using the human salience. So the point here is human saliency in training results in higher accuracy and greater generalization. The takeaway points, I believe this is the first time anyone there will ever have seen human salience used to transform the data that's used in training a deep neural network. I'll point out that we only manipulated the training data. This training data manipulation can be applied to any CNN backbone, any CNN architecture that you might want to use. We didn't use experts, and you saw the accuracy. The people were not perfect. So this is usable for any task at which humans are reasonably competent, above 50-50, and can tell you what they're looking at in the image. This leaves open many future directions of how to get the information from people best, how to organize it into a saliency map best, and other sorts of questions. For those of you who are in biometrics, and especially in iris recognition, you've seen a new state-of-the-art algorithm in OpenSet Iris Pad, and you've seen a new largest data set available to do research in that area. And I should stop and take questions. I've listed archive versions of 3 papers which will provide the bottom 2 in particular, all the details that were missing in this talk, and the latest work in this idea of how to use human saliency in neural networks to make better neural networks is in the top listed paper there. So I'm inviting questions if there's any time available for questions.
Yeah, sure, Professor Bauer. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. Actually, we have a lot of people, hearing to you. Around 200 people are in our conference site, eagerly listening to you, to your presentation.
Wonderful.
And a lot of people have joined through Facebook and YouTube. So thank you so much. Now the floor is open for questions. I think.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin, for your wonderful, excellent presentation indeed. So my question is about the saliency part. Like, for example, we know that for different domain, the salient features are different. So do you have any insight that for iris, what kind of features we can consider more salient, and based on these we can move further? So this is number 1. After that, I may ask.
Yes. So for each problem that you want to solve, you're going to have to get some idea of what humans think are the salient regions in some sample images for that problem. And each attack type that you know now is a little bit of a different problem. So people are marking, we believe, different things in different attack types, though we need to do some additional data acquisition This is the first, you're seeing the first run through the problem. We didn't really expect to get results this good. We haven't tuned how the person marks things. We haven't figured out exactly the right number of people to have mark an image to get the best results. There's many open questions to how to optimize this approach.
Next question.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is like, I mean, we know that iris is very stable with ages, with time, but still for elderly people, sometimes there are some changes, not only the noise or occlusions or blur. So what do you think about that? Like, I mean, elderly people, on that time, the attack can be much more or very difficult to get the bona fide point. So any insight?
Yes, so you've touched on a topic. I had a picture there of John Dogman and I from a walk around Cambridge where we were talking one day. We've actually had a bit of a disagreement over some of John's claims about iris being stable throughout all of adult life. We have seen some results that suggest that you would want a re-enrollment period for iris, that you wouldn't want to take an image of somebody at age 21 and try to use it to age 90. Because the eye does change, and my group would argue that the texture of the iris changes a little bit. John would say that we're wrong and we're not doing the experiments exactly right. But certainly, you can get cataracts, and that can cause a problem, and the removal of the cataracts can cause some differences. And I think that's not controversial. So the features that you would use could be changing over time, and we have not coded that into the problem yet.
Thank you very much. If
Any more question from the audience? Any more question? Well, Professor Bauer, I have a question. Maybe it might appear because it's not my field exactly. Just out of my curiosity, I'm asking you, what about how to recognize the eyes of babies? Is it? Is it?
Yes.
Well,
brand new babies, newborns, up to some age, and the field has not quite figured this out yet. But brand new babies, their irises are not correctly formed, and you could not use this on, days old to weeks old babies. There are efforts to use this on 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old children. In particular, it's been used to try to track the administration of vaccinations and things like that in some countries. But there's much less known about people who are not adults, and none of the many images that I talked about in the large data set are of people under 18, because for the rules of data acquisition and research, it's much harder to go out and take data from people who are not adults and cannot give consent legally for you to take their data and use it. So you've touched on something that the field, people have opinions of how early you can start using iris recognition reliably, but there's very, very little work. And Stephanie Schuckers at Clarkson University is probably the person whose recent work I would check out to find out as much as is known currently about that particular question.
I see. Thank you very much. And I have another small question. That
Sure.
Suppose if a person, you want to find out the IDs, take the picture of IDs with a person wearing spectacles with, tinted glass. So normally he has to take away the glass, or?
If you have on eyeglasses and sunglasses, let's say, in principle, that should not present a problem, because the system is going to be using near infrared illumination, which will sort of pass through sunglasses. And unless there are specular highlights that block a large fraction of the iris, you should be able to take a usable image even wearing normal eyeglasses.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you so much. Any more question? I will just take one more question.
Very quick one, because no one is raising. So regarding the re-enrollment process, you mentioned that, the age. re-enrollment of the iris, just like we do for face recognition. What do you think? What length? Like 20? Then it's from 50 or 60 or any idea? Because you were the big boss on this.
Oh gosh, I'm going to get in trouble, and I have colleagues in the field who I greatly respect, including John Dogman, who will insist that you do not need re-enrollment. If I was running an application, I think I would want to put, maybe a 10-year re-enrollment. You get a new driver's license every 4 years or 8 years, depending on where you live in the United States. Maybe people would readily accept the idea that, well, as I take a new picture when I get a new driver's license, why don't I take a new picture when I get a biometrically enabled identity card, right? I would not want to go 20 and 30 years using the same iris image, enrollment image for a person. And I know that some of my colleagues are going to disagree with me on that. And I will say I'm being more conservative and wanting to protect against assumptions that might be wrong.
Especially, after having so many different kinds of etaps, we need to consider this kind of re-enrollment more frequently than nothing. Yeah, I also think like that. Anyway, thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Professor Bauer. It was really a very nice
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate
and we enjoyed a lot, and looking forward to have you in another presentation in future.
That would be great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, Professor Kevin Bauer. So this is Professor Shahadat.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So actually, nice to meet you, and really we are grateful to you for the wonderful talk deliberation and for your time. And we appreciate your time for the conference.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It was great to talk to everybody today.
Actually, Professor Shahadat is the organizer of this conference. It's a very big, very big
It seems like it's going really well. I see the people seem excited on site, and there were a lot of people joining online. That's great.
Yeah. So thank you, and have a very big hand for
you.
Professor Todd.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for Professor Saiful Rahman.
He already joined, so.
I'm here.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
How are you? Fine.
I'm fine. Thank you, Fayaz.
Yeah. So
Hi, Atik. How are you?
Very nice, sir. Thank you. So you are now in Bangladesh.
I'm in Dhaka. Exactly. Not where you
because,
are, but I'm in Dhaka.
I can see
right.
the Dutch Bangla Bank at the back. But I know that you are in Bangladesh, but
Right.
not only that. Congratulations for being the IEEE President 2020.
Thank you very much. That's one reason I'm here. A lot of people want to see me in Dhaka, so I'm here.
Sir, congratulations.
Thank you, Shamim.
Formally, we would like to congratulate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I was in Dhaka in 1971, December 16. So 50 years later, I'm back.
So we are expecting your in-person present in the conference.
Yeah, but things got confused. I didn't hear back from you guys for a long time. So I said, well, I'll do it from home. Well, how was the opening this morning?
it was fantastic, really.
Yeah?
A lot of people turned up, starting from university teachers and professionals.
Okay.
And there were exhibitions also. It was really
Well,
wonderful.
I wrote to Shahada that I'll be in Dhaka and I'll be happy to attend the opening ceremony. He said, yes, he will work it out, let me know. And I never heard back from him. So I thought something is going on. I didn't pay much attention. I didn't plan to come to the in-person event for that reason, since I didn't know what was going on. So anyway, I'm here.
So, with your permission, Saifur bhai, can we start?
Yes, I'm ready.
I see. So, so welcome to our second session, Fourth Industrial Revolution as a Vehicle for Enhanced Industry-Academic Collaboration. This will be presented by Professor Saiful Rahman, I just give a brief introduction of Professor Saiful Rahman. I think all of us know him very well, and he's well known throughout the world. But still, we'll have to say something as session chair. Professor Saiful Rahman is the founding director of the Advanced Research Institute at Virginia Tech University, USA, where he is the Joseph R. Loring Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He also directs the Center of Energy and Global Environment. He is a life fellow of IEEE and an IEEE Millennium Medal winner. He was the president of IEEE Power and Energy Society for 2018 and 2019. He was the founder editor-in-chief of IEEE Electrification Magazine and IEEE Transactions on Sustainable Energy. He has published 150 journal papers and has made over 500 conference and invited presentations, huge number. In 2006, he served as a vice president for publications. He's a distinguished lecturer for IEEE PES and has lectured on renewable energy, energy efficiency, smart grid, energy internet, blockchain, IoT sensors, and integration of IoT sensors in over 30 countries. He's the founder of some beam controls. What is that? I don't know. Saiful bhai, can you just explain?
That's a software company who does work on building energy efficiency.
I see. And LLC, a Virginia-based software company providing building energy management solutions. He has served as chairman of U.S. National Science Academy Committee for International Science and Engineering. He has conducted several energy efficiency lectures, blockchains, and sensor integrated projects for Duke Energy, Tokyo, Electrical Power Company, the U.S. National Science Foundation, the U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Energy, and the state of Virginia. He has obtained his PhD from Virginia Tech. So I hand over the floor to Professor Saiful Rahman. And before that, I would like to convey our heartiest congratulations to Professor Saiful Rahman for being elected as president of the IEEE. Hopefully, he will take over his new assignment as president of IEEE in early next year, maybe after a few couple of weeks. So congratulations to you, Professor Saiful Rahman.
Thank you, Fayez.
The floor is now to you.
Let me share my screen quickly. Hold on a second. One second. Can you see my full screen, Fayez?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you.
It's clear.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm happy to be here speaking in front of you. And my session, I call my presentation, Fourth IR as a vehicle for enhanced industry academic collaboration. My talk is much high level than Dr. Boyer's talk just now. It's very high level. I'm not talking about my own research and all that here. I'm talking about how we can help Bangladesh to develop stronger industry academic collaboration and how the fourth generation industry revolution can be used as a vehicle to make it happen. I'll give you that example. Then I'll show you some work I have done as examples of industry academia collaboration and what's going on in other countries as well. Then based on that background, I'll share with you what I believe is a possible roadmap for Bangladesh to make this collaboration more practical. And then talk about my own experience in US, India, Japan, China on this very topic. And then finally, since I'm now incoming IEEE president, talk about how IEEE can help in achieving this goal with the help of the local IEEE section in Bangladesh. That's the layout of the talk coming in front of you. Now, so let's talk about this issue of what is the fourth industrial revolution as we have seen ourselves. Some of you have worked on that and at least talked about it. So first of all, in the fourth industrial revolution, a lot of automation is going on. So automation of industrial manufacturing and industrial processes, using modern smart technology. The reason I'm saying these things, as you can tell going forward, things are getting very complex and interdependent. To solve any complex problem, we must have multiple perspectives. That is where industry, academic collaboration can be used as a tool to provide that perspective to address these complex challenges. We can ignore them and stay in the late 19th century, but we can accept the challenge and move on to the 21st century. What is happening today? Large-scale machine-to-machine communication, IoT, can help with increased automation, improved communication, and self-monitoring. Somebody might say, does it mean we can take the human out of the loop? Well, not really, I'll tell you why. But this is the process we are getting into going forward. So it is large-scale machine-to-machine communication using Internet of Things to help with automation, communication, and self-monitoring. Now, if I go forward, here we have applications in advanced computing, robotics, electronic chip manufacturing, energy production delivery systems, telemedicine, electrification. For all those things, the fourth generation industrial revolution can provide immense opportunities for industry academia collaboration for meeting targeted national needs, targeted needs. This is the challenge you guys have in Bangladesh, to prioritize the national needs through many vehicles, universities, the University Grants Commission, the Ministry of Science and Technology, IT Ministry, many things are going on. I hope this roadmap I'm talking about would be of value to the policymakers in Bangladesh to prioritize what the country plans to do to make the economy more robust, more resilient, and therefore bigger, larger. Bangladesh has a target to become a fully developed country by 2041. It's about what, 20 years from now. If we don't have a roadmap, we can't get there. A roadmap will identify what we will do to reach the level of, US and Germany and France and Japan, that's fully developed countries, to do this. So this is, I hope, will be of value to the policymakers. Now the question is example of this automation. Autonomous driverless vehicles, that's coming in. And if you expand that idea, you say, well, then I don't need a driver. Even Google talks about this, Tesla has talked about this, Uber has talked about this, that you want a car, you just go to the app, give your address, car shows up without a driver. Shows up. And you sit in the back seat, go where you want to go. Uber does it today with a human driver in control. So is that what we're getting into? I don't think so, but we can use that technological development as a roadmap to do something more practical, I guess, today's definition. So I'm going to talk about my own experience and knowledge about industry academic collaboration in different countries. I show here in US, China, Japan, India, EU, and so on. Let's look at the first one. I used to work at NSF. US National Science Foundation, S is missing here. National Science Foundation has a GOLI program. GOLI stands for Grant Opportunities for Academic Liaison with Industry. GOLI program. What does it mean? You as a faculty member in the US or an industry research engineer can apply to NSF to get money. Money means supporting your salary or travel to work with either industry or academia, depending on where you are. So NSF will give you money to an industry engineer to take leave from his or her company and come to Virginia Tech for 6 months, 9 months, whatever the time is, and work with Virginia Tech research professors and do something different and unique. Why that is important? When the research engineer from a company comes to Virginia Tech on campus and spends time with our faculty and students, we can get this person's ideas, work experience, and perceptions about academia to bring to the table. That's one program. Some years back in the 70s, US government ran the RAN program, RANN, Research Applied to National Needs, very relevant for Bangladesh. With a lot of national needs, we cannot just depend on garment sector forever. I've talked about this many places. We in Bangladesh, have to produce skilled labor. And that skilled labor will be of value to countries in the Middle East and Africa, even in this part of the world, Asia, so that we can become a supplier for not only unskilled laborers in the Middle East, which they earn very little money, but because a lot of them have gone there, we're getting $25 billion a year remittance, but you can make few times that much money by exporting skilled labor who are working, getting trained here, working outside. That's RAN program. Similarly today, US, EU, UK run joint programs. US India, US China, EU China, EU India. These are going on, multi-million-dollar projects. What that does, these large projects require industry participation. So a faculty member at Cambridge teams up with the faculty at Tsinghua and Beijing, writes a proposal. That's not enough. You must show industry participation in England and in China. In addition to faculty participation, do this. This is a good example. There's no US Bangladesh or US and EU Bangladesh program yet. So this is where our policymakers, our UGC people have to get going so that we can move from our current way of doing business. If you want to really become a developed country by 2041, to get to that level of academic and industry participation. Third is Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, JSPS. They support industry academy collaboration. I was a JSPS fellow in Japan many years back. I was paid by JSPS to go and work in Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, as a research engineer to show or learn from them and show to them my techniques for demand response or load control and their experience in applying my technique. Next is the GAN program. GAN stands for Global Initiatives of Academic Networks, Indian program in India. The Ministry of Science, most in Science Technology, they call it DST, Department of Science Technology, DST India, funds universities to bring in foreign experts, professors, industry engineers to India for 2 weeks or more, up to a month, and spend time in a workshop environment to facilitate knowledge transfer. I have given 2 GAN workshops in New Delhi, and in both workshops, I had about half the participants from industry. One in New Delhi, it was Tata Power, TPDDL. Their engineers came in large numbers. 20 of them came and spent a week with me. That means this is where the University in Delhi organized it, is coming closer to industry engineers. So I'm giving these examples for the policymakers in Bangladesh to think about it, so they can do something different if we really want to be a developed country in 20 years. Okay, going forward, a roadmap for Bangladesh. I'm talking about this for some time now. We must find ways to facilitate industry's appreciation of academia beyond producing graduates. This is very common today. Go to PDB, go to whatever, telecom industry. They think Bauer His job is over once Boyd has graduated, doubly graduates, and that's done. And they don't communicate anymore. They don't. Because they think these graduates will be trained in their place of work and they can do what they want to do. This idea has to be broken somehow. To make that happen, I would recommend strongly to develop GOLI-like programs in Bangladesh. What does that mean? GOLI stands for Grant Opportunities for Academic Liaison to Industry. Then industry will see the job of Boyd, do it, whatever, is not done by producing the graduates and then forget about them. The linkage is important. That's what I mean by industry-academia collaboration. So, we have to encourage and reward student and faculty participation in industry. What do you mean by reward? That means if you want to have a student work at PDB as an intern, there must be funding for the student to work as an intern at PDB. Without PDB have to pay the salary as much as they can or cannot. And EDC funding can be a vehicle to do that. Facilitate industry contribution in academic programs. Facilitate, not require. For example, what we do here, we invite industry engineers to come to my university and give seminars, lectures in my class, maybe once a semester. That gives two things to my students. One is they can hear from a practicing engineer. At the same time, they can ask questions based on the knowledge they're getting in my class, how that knowledge is going to be relevant when they go to work. That's how you create a better engineer, and the vehicle to create the better engineer is this industry-academia collaboration. So I believe this stuff we talked about here, the elements of the fourth industrial revolution, like robotics, complex systems, telecommunication, encouraging, like Dr. Bauer's talk about neural network, for example. Those can be building blocks for the industry academic collaboration. They'll help to deal with complex problems. One thing I'd like to say here in the context of any developing country, we say all the time that Bangladesh cannot develop iPhone from scratch because you don't have that much money to deploy research engineers to build the hardware. That is true. But as you all know, hardware precedes software. That means hardware comes first, then you build software to make the hardware more useful. For example, iPhone is done by Apple. They have some programs built in, their OS is built in, but they have allowed people in all over the world to develop apps for the iPhone, which make it more relevant. The app that can measure my number of footsteps I'm walking or running. Footsteps, that's an app. It was not built by Apple. Apple gave the hardware and the API, and people figured it out. So I think it is quite possible for bright students and engineers in Bangladesh to focus on software development for products on the market already. You're not spending billions and billions of dollars to develop the hardware. Forget it, it's done. But you have now the innovative mind to use the hardware capability to do new things. That's another example of academy, industry collaboration in the fourth industrial revolution. So I am saying the fourth IR is not a small defined thing. It's very big. It depends on your imagination, where you want to go. Talk about IoT, talk about sensor networks, talk about neural network, talk about IRIS management. It's okay, but we can do more. I cannot think of all the results yet myself, but I want you, faculty and students and industry engineers, to keep your mind open to move forward, showing we can do a lot of different things. So my own experience, I have led many industry-sponsored research projects in the US, company power company, computer company, and so on and so forth. I was a fellow of JSPS, Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, working as a research engineer at TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, and that gave me a better perception, not only US perspective, but other countries' perspective as well. I have had several US National Science Foundation in India, Department of Science Technology projects in India, 3-4 of them. Again, those projects, when I was there, working with the university faculty, they invited, in many cases, especially Kolkata and Bhubaneswar, I worked on those multiple times, industry participation to come and listen to me. I was in Bhubaneswar NIT some years back, and Bhubaneswar is very well known for a large steel mill, very large steel mill. And I was talking about energy efficiency in buildings. And they came to learn about how they can use energy efficiency technology for making their factory space more efficient. That's an example of collaboration. I'm an advisor to the Global Energy Interconnection Development and Collaboration Organization in China. Their focus is cross-border energy transfer. Could be electricity, could be gas, whatever it is. Again, I am encouraged, allowed to work with electricity supply companies in China, and they have talked about moving power through Myanmar into Bangladesh, for example. So this is an example of how industry and academia can work together. In this case, in Bangladesh, university here can do a study at what voltage you should bring power from Kunming or in Yunnan province in China to Bangladesh to reduce the losses and secure the flow of electricity over the third country's national borders. As an example, we have done this work for multiple years now. So now I'm incoming IEEE president. I've talked about what IEEE can help in this process. IEEE has what we call the Distinguished Lecture Programs, DLP, by society versus computer society, signal processing, power energy have these programs. Why I'm talking about this? If you want to invite an industry engineer or a professor from Washington to Dhaka, who pays his or her airfare, expensive. IEEE pays the travel expense for this expert to go to the host country. And host country section or chapter will take care of his or her local expenses. Not a big deal. That program exists. So you can talk to your colleagues in other societies, other parts of US in this case, and build something that will be useful and support your mission to attract industry academic experts from other countries, from US, and other US. Number two, Bangladesh section of IEEE can organize workshops to build awareness and facilitate industry participation. 3 years ago now, IEEE BD section organized a smart city workshop. I was a speaker there 3 years ago. And they had people from companies, CEOs came, Dhaka City North Mayor came, many people from academia, of course, came, PDB people came. So this is a good example of IEEE being a neutral platform, can bring in industry, academia, government together without worried about who gets the credit for doing this. Very valuable opportunity. Also, we can use tutorials and other learning materials from IEEE sources. Like I built what is now known as IEEE PS, Power Energy Society library and a university with a lot of content, tutorials, videos, learning materials, and those are free to the members of IEEE Power Energy Society. As an example. So there is a chapter in Bangladesh, IEEE PS, they can have access to all of that information. So my point is a lot of things are there, it's moving around. Just find out what you got and use the material relevant to you. That is what I mean by facilitate knowledge sharing. So that's where I am right now. I'm pretty much done. So based on this IEEE opportunities, I would like to see that folks like yourself get busy. And if you want to learn from me, you can share your ideas to my Twitter account, S. Rahman VT, and we can communicate down the road. This QR code also has my address and information. So with that, let me stop here. I've given you my website, srahman.org. It has a lot of lectures I've given globally for the last 2-3 years. And learn more, you can ask me questions. So now I'm going to stop here. Formal presentation is over. I will send the control back to Fayaz to make comments or allow questions to come through.
Thank you, Professor Saiful Rahman, depicting a very nice picture about how to establish industry-academy collaboration, which is very important as far as Bangladesh is concerned. Really, our academy and industry collaboration is not that much. I mean, and most of the industry people, they are not that much keen to attract academic people for joint research or on any topic or any sort of problems. So thank you very much for highlighting this and also about IEEE. So first of all, I just open the floor for questions. Anybody, please go ahead. Any questions you have?
While they're thinking about possible questions, let me
Right.
let me explain a little bit.
Yeah.
I grew up here. I know how industry thinks.
Okay.
Industry thinks you produce a graduate BSc electrical engineer, you're done. Your job, Boyd is over. I don't need Boyd anymore. I can figure it out. This will not change unless we do something jointly. And then the money issue comes up. Who pays for it? India DSC does it, they pay. JSPS pays, China pays, US NSF pays. So somehow this conference, I understand, has some UGC role in it. UGC could be a good vehicle to have programs. I said, facilitate and reward this participation. You must put money on the table. So industry person comes in, gets rewarded somehow. I don't know, we don't know the details. In the US, they share their salary, in fact. And then they have some encouragement. So I am very optimistic. It can be done, provided we are open about this, make the level playing field, so anybody can participate. It doesn't become a closed loop of people who are working among themselves. So this is the risk. So anyway, that's my set of added comments.
May I add something?
Yeah,
Okay,
please go.
sir. I mean, thank you very much. It's a really a good guidelines and a presentation and based on the reality. So, but the problem I feel you can just add and help because there are some others in the stage as well. That in Bangladesh, people think that small amount of money they give, and very quickly they want return. But in research, people invest millions and billions, and we cannot get all. Most of the time, the results are not coming immediately. Like, you give some money and buy a solar panel and then say, okay, buy a boat or something. They think that it is like this. This is I found from many senior people and even from policymakers. So I request you to say some real pictures regarding what the funders do and what is the real, expectations from the researchers and how it goes on. Otherwise, there is a total mistrust. And I found that even today from a top guy, the statement was that, which is like that, you give money and they want immediate, output, which can be usable. It's like very unrealistic to me because we have been working in different places at different projects and millions of dollars are spending, but we don't get results in a day. We develop and sometimes it comes. So many cases it takes longer time. So please give some point. If I'm wrong, it's okay, but
No,
I
thank you,
need
Ahad.
some
Very good point.
reflection.
This is typical. I have seen how Korea has grown, how India has grown, as China has grown in the last 30 years. I'm I'm in the US for like 50 years almost now. So how things have changed. If you go back to India 20 years ago, exact same thinking, same philosophy. Results tomorrow, and industry doesn't need universities participation beyond producing graduates. It's over. It's changing now. It takes some time. To address your quick question about expecting results tomorrow, that is expectation by industry because they're spending money to get some gadget done. It happens in the US as well. But I like to see there is no comparable body in Bangladesh like US National Science Foundation. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. UGC does some funding which can increase. So what is the comparable body in Bangladesh for National Science Foundation? That's zero, doesn't exist. India has it, China has it, Korea has it, COSAP, I worked with them, UK has it, Germany has it, Japan has it also. So my message to UGC is expand that idea. I've been working with Dr. Taufiqullah Chaudhary, Prime Minister Advisor on Energy and Power, and I'm working with him for 5 years now. They have developed what's called Bangladesh Energy Power Research Council, EPRC. That council funds research without expecting results even next year. Research, but it has to be targeted, not blue sky research. So that's one place to go, and they have more money than there is a good proposal that they can fund today. It exists. So Boycotting got some funding, I know. They have gone to the EPRC management has gone to other universities. I was part of a couple of visits to other schools in Bangladesh, and you're right, industry expects result, but at the same time, our professors also not very big thinking. They don't think. They think I guess in consulting, I'm happy with. So that idea has to change. I gave a talk a couple of days, yesterday in India. Say, you work for yourself, your society, your country. If you think I work for myself, then nothing happens. You should have part of your mind, I'll say 10% for my country is good, not for my family is good. That has to happen over time. It was the case with us in India, big India, 200 years back. It was like this. Now it's not there. India doesn't have that either. So answer your question, long answer, Ahad, is two things. One is make funding available without expecting results tomorrow. But we must expect some output of it. When I get NSF funding, they ask me what papers you have published and where. If I have not published journal papers, I have less chance of getting renewal for this grant. So this is an example. And problem here is, it's a very small country compared to US in terms of the IP volume. So that's a challenge I've seen in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Indonesia, my own experience, because the country is so small, people know each other. So if you are writing a proposal to UGC, goes for review to other professors who know each other, either they like you or dislike you. And that thinking will cloud their judgment. I don't like this guy, maybe it's not good. That's done. So how do you find an unrelated reviewer to review these proposals? It's not possible in Bangladesh, no. So I told EPRC, send this to outside Bangladesh. And they did. They did. And they even said they'll pay money for a professor in Caltech or whatever it is to review this proposal, which is not true. And NSF doesn't pay money to review. They don't, it's free, on time. But EPS said, we'll pay money. I know because I used to work reviewer for Qatar National Research Foundation, QNRF. They pay money to review a proposal. Hong Kong pays money to review a proposal. So this, I'm losing my focus. Somebody coming up with a new, somebody else sharing the screen looks like. Anyway, that's fine. So anyway, that's my answer to your question, Ahad.
Thank you. And we have a Nobel laureate with us, Professor Oliver Hart. You are most welcome, Professor Hart. Thank you for joining.
Fida Hassan has a question, looks like.
Do you have any question, Professor Hart?
Oh, hello. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. No, just hello. I need to share my slides. Should I do that? Should I share my slide or not yet?
Just a second, Professor Shahadat, there is another session now?
It will start from 8 p.m. in 3 minutes.
I see. So,
And Professor Vincent, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Bragg University, he will preside the session.
I see. So we convey our sincere thanks to Professor Saiful Rahman for his nice presentation as usual. And we're looking forward to have another presentation from Professor Saiful Rahman within a short span of time. Thank you, Professor Rahman. A very big hand for Professor Rahman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay. So should I put them up now or should I wait?
Actually, we are waiting for Professor Vincent.
Professor Chang has joined.
Oh, yeah.
Request Professor Chang to start the
Okay. So your talk is supposed to start in 1 minute. In 1 minute. So I am working as the moderator of your talk. So actually, I was in touch with you through email communication. Okay, nice to meet you.
And you?
Okay, just few seconds, so we can start.
Shamim Kaisar, Vincent, I cannot see him.
Hi, this is Reba. Let me just check if what's wrong with him.
I have actually seen him. He has joined, but disappeared.
So, Shamim Kaisar, can you see Professor Vincent?
I think I don't have his phone number. Can you please call him?
No, actually he's in UK. His register mentioned me today, and they have sent him the Zoom link as well as the Zoom ID. So if he is not available, anyway, we can start.
Sir, I think you can, just start because time is up.
So,
Yeah,
or Professor Ahad may preside the session if he is not available.
No, sir, you do. Shada sir, you continue. You start.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. It is. We can start. It is nice to Nobel laureate Professor Oliver Hart from MIT. So I would like to introduce him, and we are expecting that Professor Sang should preside over this important sessions, and Professor Oliver Hart will deliver a very important talk today, and which will be very much beneficial for Bangladesh. So because Professor Chang is not available, I am requesting Professor Ahad to preside over these sessions. So Professor Ahad, let me introduce Professor Ahad. He is a professor of Dhaka University of Bangladesh. Currently, he is in Japan. And I would like to request Professor Ahad to preside over these sessions. Professor Ahad, please.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I think it's it's very difficult to introduce a Nobel laureate. So welcome, Oliver Hart. We are extremely delighted and we are grateful to you for your time. And I hope to meet you at Harvard University in the future. So without any further introduction, I request you to start. Every word will be exciting for us, not my word about you. That's how I feel. Thank you so much. Please share your slide and let us
all right,
enjoy
I
your
will,
excellent
yes.
job.
All right,
Thank you.
let me try to do that.
Excuse me, this is Vincent Chen. I will just managed to join the meeting. Apologize. Apologize to Professor Hart. I'm actually traveling in the Middle East and they blocked the data. Right.
Okay. So Vincent, I introduced Oliver Hart. So he will start now, but as you are here, please, organize the session as well. We enjoy it together. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you to taking care of the on my behalf. So if you have introduced Professor Hart, then there's no need for me to introduce him. Professor Hart, the floor is yours, please.
All right. Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you, Professors Hussain, Ahad, and Chang, for the introductions. So my talk is about, it's called Exit versus Voice, and this is based on joint work with two co-authors, Eleonora Brocado and Luigi Zingalis. So the talk is about getting companies to behave in a more socially responsible way. And so let me start off with a bit of motivational evidence. It turns out that companies are under more and more pressure to be socially responsible, to pursue environmental and social goals as well, rather than just making money. And on this slide, I have some evidence about that. The second bullet point is about divestment activity, so a sort of measure of how much divestment is going on. That is people not holding shares in dirty companies. The next bullet point is about boycotting activity. So that's another way that people can be active. Consumers can boycott products of dirty firms. And the final one, which is particularly relevant for today's talk, is about engagement. So if you just look at that one, it tells us that in 2016, 3% of environmental and social shareholder proposals, this is in the United States, received majority support, whereas in 2021, it was 20%. So that's a very large increase. Okay, so things are going on the ground, as it were. Now, at the same time, a growing academic literature has questioned the Friedman doctrine, that's Milton Friedman. What is that? Well, Milton Friedman wrote an article in the New York Times just over 50 years ago, in which he argued that companies have no social responsibility except to make money. That's their only responsibility. And his argument was that companies are owned by people, shareholders. What do the company should be acting on their behalf, and what do they want? Well, he argued they want to be as wealthy as possible. So if the companies make lots of money and they distribute that in the form of dividends, that makes their owners wealthy. And then the owners, if they are socially responsible, well, they can give to their favorite charity. And the company shouldn't be doing that sort of thing on their behalf. Now, it turns out that Friedman's position, although it's been extremely influential, is wrong. It's based on, I think, an incorrect argument, because in some cases, firms are better at carrying out social goals than individuals. So rather than just making money and handing that to individuals so that individuals can do good if they want, it's actually more efficient for the firms to do good. And I have an earlier paper with Luigi Zingalis where we make this point with some examples. So if you think of pollution or carbon emissions, well, that's a form of pollution. If a firm can reduce those, maybe with some loss of profit, it might be much more socially efficient for the firm to do that rather than making the increased profit, handing a higher dividend out to the shareholders, and then shareholders trying to clean up the mess that the company has made. That as soon as you put it that way, you realize that could be, sort of a bit ridiculous. If the pollution is caused by the firm in the first place, it just might be much cheaper for them to avoid it than to have individuals sort of clean up after them. And so that if the shareholders are socially responsible, which Friedman assumed, I mean, he certainly thought people give to charity and this kind of thing, but so they may actually want the firms they own to curb pollution. I'm going to show you an example of that in a few minutes, but that's sort of the point of the first two slides is really to say that on the one hand, there's a lot of activism going on in terms of divestment, boycotts, engagement, shareholder resolutions, and on the other hand, the sort of theory supporting companies maximizing profit has been questioned, I think correctly questioned. Okay, now what we do in this paper is we compare different strategies that socially responsible people can use, and a socially responsible person here is going to be someone who puts some weight on the welfare of others as well as themselves. So they're not entirely self-interested. And in fact, in the last session, I was hearing about the argument that people in Bangladesh need to put some weight, if I understood it correctly, on the welfare of Bangladesh as well as on just themselves. And this is very much in line with that. And I think, people are socially responsible, some, of course, more than others. But I don't think that many people are just 100% self-interested. Now, okay, so we talk here about voice and exit strategies. These are terms that Hirschman talked a lot about. He made those terms sort of famous in a book years ago. And we're using the same terminology here. Voice means things like, so here I'm going to use it to mean shareholders voting, or in other words, in other ways, engaging with companies to push them to be more socially responsible. So it's the last bullet point on the first slide, the shareholder resolutions. That's voice, whereas exit refers to getting out of companies that are not doing the right thing, that are dirty. I'm going to use these words, dirty and clean, just for simplicity. So dirty companies are the polluters. And one thing you can do as a shareholder is you can say, I'm not going to hold shares in such companies, or as a consumer, I'm not going to buy their product. So those are exit strategies. And what we're interested in this paper is which strategy has a greater impact. So we have in mind that these people, socially responsible people who are trying to push companies to be more socially responsible, they're consequentialists in the sense that they're not just doing it to feel good, they're doing it to actually have an impact. And so what we do in the paper is to compare voice and exit as strategies for having an impact. And what we conclude is that voice is more effective than is often thought, and exit is less effective than is often thought. And I think that's important because we hear a lot about exit. We hear, for example, at Harvard, the students pushed Harvard to exit from dirty companies, and they've done so. And that this is very, you know, a lot of students do this at their universities. Cambridge University in England is another one. I don't know what the situation is in Bangladesh, but certainly there's a lot of pressure on universities to divest. And I guess my view is, based on what I'm going to say today, that maybe those students would be better, you know, they would be more effective if they pushed Harvard University, Cambridge University, not to divest, but stick with the dirty companies and push them to become better citizens. The voice strategy. Now, in order to show you more clearly how voice can be powerful, more powerful than perhaps people often think, I want to consider, we're going to work through a very simple example, and it's a real example, a real world example. It involves the American chemical company DuPont, and we have to go back in time to 1984. So in 1984, DuPont faced a choice between polluting the Ohio River with a toxic substance known as PFOA, or investing in incineration. So if they paid for the cost of incineration, they would avoid the pollution. Now, this case, because it turns out DuPont decided not to invest in incineration, so there was pollution of the Ohio River, and with some bad consequences. People got ill, people died who were living there, and eventually, but it took a long time and it was very circuitous, eventually the case reached the courts. And as a result of that, you know, quite a bit of information is available. And my co-authors in Garlis, together with another person, Shapira, they wrote a paper based on court case documents. They used those documents to calculate the cost of incineration in present value terms. That was $19 million. And the present value of the social costs of pollution, so the harm, was $350 million. These are in 1984 dollars, so obviously we have to multiply by quite a bit to get them into 2021 dollars. So these are two numbers to have in mind. 19 million is the cost of avoiding the pollution, and 350 million is the damage from the pollution. Okay, now, as I said, DuPont decided not to incinerate, and that was socially inefficient. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a simple cost-benefit calculation. This is the way economists think about it. If at a cost of $19 million, you can avoid harm of $350 million, that's obviously a good thing to do. 19 is less than 350. They're both in present value terms, so current 1984 dollars. So, okay, it seems simple, but DuPont didn't do it. Now, what I want to ask is the following. Suppose shareholders could have voted on this. So remember, I'm interested in voice here. So the easiest way to think about how voice might work is to imagine that the shareholders of DuPont were asked at the time to vote on whether DuPont should incinerate or not. And I want to imagine for the moment that these are diversified shareholders. So in fact, I want to think of it in today's terms. So think of someone in the United States who has $500,000 invested in the stock market. So that's quite a lot of money, but it's not, you know, we're not talking about, by American standards, an extremely rich person, but of course, obviously, we're not talking about a poor person either. We're talking about someone in the middle. So if they have $500,000 invested in the US market today, that is 10 to the minus 8th of the total US stock market. That means 1/100 millionth of the market. And I want to imagine they're diversified. So they hold a little bit of every American company. They're holding an index fund that covers the whole market. So that means they would hold 10 to the minus 8th of DuPont, along with every other company. Now, okay, so I'm imagining that these shareholders are asked to vote on this proposal, incinerate or not. When you vote, assuming you bother at all, you may as well vote the outcome you want, because the only time your vote matters is if you're pivotal, which is highly unlikely, but it's the only time it matters. And in that case, you're deciding the outcome, so you may as well, which outcome do you prefer? That's the way you should vote. Okay, how to think about it? Well, sorry, this is the wrong word. This is it should be incineration there, not filtration. Incineration would mean that DuPont has to pay $19 million, right? That's the cost of incineration. And you own 1/100 millionth of DuPont. So 19 million divided by 100 million is 19 cents. Okay, I think I got that right. 19 million divided, you own 1/100 million. So 19 million over 100 million is 19 cents. So that is the cost you personally would pay if DuPont incinerates, okay? Now, so that's coming out of your pocket. What is the benefit from incineration? Well, the net social gain is, this is the way you should think about it. There's a $350 million gain in terms of the harm that is avoided, right? Which is going to cause illness and death among people living near the Ohio River. But there is a cost which is going to be borne by your fellow shareholders. You're bearing 19 cents and they're bearing the other 19 million. So I think we can forget about the 19 cents and just look at it as 350 gain minus 19 loss, all times a million, which is, 350 minus 19 is 331. So that is the net gain. So as a socially responsible person, the way we think about it is you look at the personal effect on you, which is 19 cents loss, and then the gain to everybody else in net terms, which is 331 million. So the way you should be voting, you should be thinking, am I willing to give up 19 cents for a net social gain of $331 million? Well, I think there are not many people who wouldn't say yes to that, right? 19 cents, it's not really very much. And there's this huge social gain. So our argument is that the vast majority of people would vote yes, and that therefore majority vote would lead to incineration being chosen. Okay, this in a nutshell is how voice can be very powerful if people are allowed to express their views. Of course, they were not. They weren't asked, and indeed DuPont decided not to incinerate. Now, why? Why do we think they made the socially wrong decision? Here are two possibilities. The first is they might have accepted the logic around at the time, and this was, partly what Milton Friedman had said back in 1970, but he wasn't the only one saying this. They might have said to themselves, our duty is to maximize profit or market value because that's what our owners want. As I've just tried to show you that the owners I don't think would have wanted that, but maybe that was that was a lot of people thought that at the time, that companies didn't have a social responsibility, and as long as you stuck within the law, you should just make as much money as possible. So it's possible they thought that. It's also quite likely that top management was incentivized to do this. In other words, they had shares and stock options and all the rest of it. And so, they were going to be rewarded for higher profit, and not for incinerating. The other possibility is it turns out that at the time, the DuPont had a significant shareholder. The Bronfman family owned 20%. And for them, the calculation was a bit different. So as a 20% owner, if the company incinerates, that's 19 million out of the profits, and that's you own 20%. So you're going to bear 20% of 19 million, which is 3.8 million. The net social gain is 335 million. Where do I get that from? Well, notice 335 minus 3.8 is approximately 331, which is what we had on the previous slide as the social gain. So that's where that comes from. And anyway, without worrying about the exact numbers, what you see is that this trade-off is far less attractive than the previous one. The previous one was give up 19 cents for a gain of 331 million. Here, somebody's being asked to give up 3.8 million for a social gain of 335 million. And remember, this is in 1984 dollars, so it's more now in today's terms. So, one can imagine somebody who might say, no, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not sure whether the Bronfmans were asked about this, but if they had been, they might have said no. So that's another lesson that comes out of this, that we often think for people in the audience who are familiar with the corporate finance literature or the corporate law literature, there are quite a few people who've argued that large shareholders are good for corporate governance because they keep management in check. So these are, people worry about the principal agent problem and management just doing things to benefit themselves rather than shareholders. And if you have a large shareholder, they're going to monitor what management is doing. So large shareholders good, small shareholders bad. But here we get the opposite. When it comes to social matters or ESG is environmental, social governance, it's the other way around, because we saw that actually it was the small shareholders who were going to say 19 cents, I'm willing to give that up for 331 million, and which is a socially efficient outcome. They would vote to filtrate, whereas the large shareholder might not, because it's hurting them too much. Okay, so that's how voice can work very well. Now I want to turn to exit, divest, and here I'm not going to be talking about consumer boycotts or worker boycotts. We do talk about that in the paper. By the way, let me say, if you're interested in more details, you can go to my website, just go Oliver Hart Harvard, and you'll find this paper. It's a technical paper, but if you're interested, it's there. In that we do consider consumer and worker boycotts as well as shareholder boycotts, which are otherwise known as divestment. But for the talk, I'm just going to think about shareholders trying to put pressure on DuPont by divesting, by selling their shares, basically saying, unless you incinerate, we're not going to hold your shares. Okay, so that's the strategy I want to consider now. Well, okay, so suppose some shareholders of DuPont then sell their shares to put pressure on DuPont. Now, if other shareholders or investors cannot adjust their portfolios, then there will be a dramatic effect, because some people are selling, nobody's buying. The share price will drop until it hits zero. Supply exceeds demand. Now, if that was the end of the story, a market value maximizing manager would say, wait a minute. So imagine, think of the DuPont CEO or the board, and they see the share price dropping, down to zero. They're going to think, wow, that's terrible. We've been incentivized to maximize market value, profit or market value, and we got to do something about the share price. And so what they would do is they would immediately announce they're going to incinerate, because then all those shareholders are going to come back. Okay. However, of course, other investors, shareholders will not just stand by and do nothing. As the share price falls, they're going to say to themselves, wow, this is a bargain. This DuPont shares are a bargain because nothing's happened to the profitability of DuPont, and it's become very, very cheap. So they're going to jump in and buy the shares that the divestors are selling. And just as an example of this, to show that this happens in practice, the Financial Times recently had an article about this and there's, you can find it if you want. They reported that hedge funds are scooping up the shares of oil companies dumped by socially responsible divestors like Harvard. Harvard sells its shares and the hedge funds say, wow, that's great, it's a bargain. And they jump in and buy them. And so that means the price of shares, instead of falling, it's going to maybe fall a little bit and then it start to rise again. And it may end up being very close to where it was in the first place, in which case a value maximizing manager will basically hardly notice what's going on and will just decide to do, stick with whatever it was doing. That is not to incinerate. Now, in fact, what one can show, and here I'm afraid I have to refer you to the paper because this turns out to be more technical. What we show in the paper is we have a model in which there isn't just one DuPont. There are many firms like DuPont. Each one has this decision to make, incinerate or don't incinerate. And what we show is that exit, that is divestment, will not cause all the DuPonts to decide to incinerate. It will not, which is the socially desirable outcome. That's what you want. But it's not going to happen as long as there is a group of shareholders or investors out there who would not give up 19 cents for a social gain of $4.7. Okay, so the point is, imagine yourself being asked, are you willing to give up 19 cents so that the rest of society gains $4.7? Or, let's multiply it by 10. Are you willing to give up $19 for a social gain of $47? Well, I think many people would say, no, that's not such an impressive social gain. And I'm not willing to give up that amount. So it seems very plausible there are people who wouldn't make that trade-off. And as long as those people are around, those are the people who will buy up the shares of when Harvard sells its shares. And that's going to stop the DuPonts of the world deciding to incinerate. That's what you can show. Those people will keep the share price high enough so that it will be rational for the managers of DuPont who are market value maximizers just to say, no, we're going to stick with being dirty. So I just want to go back to the voice result. We get a huge difference here. For voice to work, to get DuPont to incinerate, all you needed was a majority of people who were willing to give up 19 cents for $331 million social gain, right? As long as a majority are like that, you get a good outcome. For divestment to work, you basically need everybody to be willing to give up 19 cents for a social gain of $4.7, which is highly implausible, I think. So this, in a nutshell, is why voice can be more effective than exit. Okay, let me make some further remarks and some concluding remarks. So if one accepts then my argument, it suggests that voice should be encouraged, not discouraged. I think historically, at least in the United States, and that's, I am talking about the United States. I'm sorry to be so focused on that, but it is a large country, and that's where, you know, a lot of the action is right now, and it's also what I know more about. So historically, voice hasn't been particularly encouraged. Shareholder resolutions have been hard to put forward, and even, you know, they're quite expensive, and even if you put them forward and they're voted on, and a majority approves of the resolution, even in those cases, which used to be very rare but are now becoming more common, as the first slide showed, even then, the resolutions are not binding. So the way things are structured in the United States via regulation and all the rest is that the management can just ignore such a resolution if they choose, which doesn't seem, I think, good. If we think voice can be a positive thing, as my example shows, then actually we want management to take it seriously. Well, there are signs that the landscape is changing. And how might it, I'll talk a bit about some changes, but in the future, one could imagine companies or asset managers. So here I want to bring in something very important, which is these days in the United States, most shares are held through institutions. So this is a change in the last 40 years, say. Individual ownership, you know, in other words, me owning a particular company, there's less and less of that. And there's much more of people buying a fund through an asset manager like Vanguard or BlackRock or State Street or Fidelity. So, you know, you just buy one of their funds, and those funds buys the shares of the companies. So it's sort of indirect. So this has become much more important. And so I would argue that not only companies should be learning from their shareholders what they want, as in the DuPont example, DuPont actually maybe even asking shareholders to vote on something, but also the asset managers, so BlackRock, can also say, you know, we have 5% of most American companies. We own that through you, through, you know, it's through our own people who put their money with us. On their behalf, we own 5%. And we'd like to know from our investors how they would like us, BlackRock, to vote on shareholder resolutions. Okay, so we could see more of that. People, companies and asset managers finding out what the individual investors want. And here's an example of that. In practice, the fintech asset management firm Betterment has been asking their investors what proxy fights they want them to engage in. In other words, what issues are on your mind? Another thing that's going on, BlackRock, as I say, one of the biggest, has said to some of its bigger investors, you can vote yourselves on shareholder resolutions. So previously, it would have been BlackRock voting on them without knowing the preferences. So the CEO of BlackRock is Larry Fink. He's very famous, very influential. And, you know, he talks about how he votes on things, but he only very recently has he started, or you know, the company started to say, maybe instead of voting our own social preferences, or maybe not taking social things into account at all, and just voting on, you know, in terms of what's the money maximizing strategy, maybe we should ask our own investors what they want, or rather perhaps just delegate the vote to them. That's happening. Another possibility, which is also beginning to happen, is that given that, in fact, you know, if I had to vote, so, you know, I hold mutual funds, and by the way, a lot of this is very relevant for pension contributions. So a lot of people invest their pension money in mutual funds, which in turn are buying shares in DuPont and Microsoft and Google and all the rest. rather than, you know, the BlackRock strategy of saying to the investors in BlackRock, when shareholder resolutions come up, why don't you vote on them rather than us voting on them? The problem with that is there are many shareholder resolutions every year because there are a lot of companies and they all have them. And, you know, we're busy people. So individuals, the individuals behind all this, people like you and me, we have day jobs and we don't have time to vote on all these things or to think about it. So another approach, which I think is very practical, is for asset managers to set up funds with mission statements. So basically, you know, Vanguard could have a fund, a green fund, which says, we're going to hold the US stock market. So it's going to be an index fund. We're not going to actively manage it. That's very popular these days, to have a passive fund that just holds companies and doesn't buy and sell all the time. And this green fund could do exactly that, just like, you know, what's going on now. But with the difference that they're going to say, when it comes to shareholder resolutions, we're going to be pushing companies to be more environmentally conscious and to reduce their carbon footprint and this kind of thing. And then if you like that idea, you put your money in that fund. And then you don't have to think about it anymore because these people are doing it on behalf. They're doing, okay. And, you know, of course, Vanguard could also have, you know, not everybody cares about the environment. So the Vanguard could also have a brown fund, which votes against those resolutions. And if you are that way inclined, you put your money with that fund. Anyway, this is reducing the burden on the small investor. Now, as an example of this sort of mission statement, here is a fund, it's called Vote, and it was set up recently by Engine Number One. Now, Engine Number One is a small hedge fund, which had a huge success recently. So some of you who read the business pages may have heard of Engine Number One because they managed to get 3 people on the board of ExxonMobil against management's wishes. And this is almost unheard of, and particularly for such a small investor. The way they were able to do this was they were able to get support from the big players like the ones I mentioned, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and some pension funds, and it all added up to a large number of votes on their behalf. And so that's why 3 of their candidates got on the board. Now, at the same time, or shortly after that, they set up this fund called Vote, which invests in 500 of the largest US companies and aims to, here I quote, strategically hold companies and leadership teams accountable while focusing on environmental, social, and governance issues that create value. So this is a sort of mission statement. And if you like that idea, you can invest in this fund. Now, I think this is a good start. I don't think it's, you know, it's perfect because it's a pretty vague statement. And also, it doesn't acknowledge trade-offs. So it is basically suggesting that one can be green and profitable. So if you look at it, you know, it says, while focusing on ESG issues that create value. So it doesn't sort of say, well, sometimes we may be pushing a company to do something that reduces value. As in my incineration example, that was an example where it did cost you to be good. It cost you 19 million. And the only question was whether you're willing to bear that cost. Well, this fund hasn't quite acknowledged that, which is, I think, a limitation. But maybe in the future, things will, people will be willing to acknowledge that. Okay, so this is a sense of, I'm trying to give you a sense that, let me just finish by saying that voice can be powerful. I think it should be encouraged. It can be more powerful than exit. And there are signs that voice is being heard more and will be heard more in the future, which is, I think, a good thing. Now, I should say one thing, which actually I had something on an earlier slide, but I think I forgot to say it. But let me say it now. It's crucially important. All of this that I've been talking about is really under the assumption that government hasn't fully done its job, because economists think that when you have something like an externality, and that's what carbon emissions causing climate change are a huge example of, or rather an example of a huge externality. And economists think that the right way to deal with that is for the government to make people, individual agents like consumers and firms, pay for the damage they're doing to the environment. And the simplest way to do that would be to have a carbon tax. So probably many of you have heard about that idea. This is something that gets huge amounts of support from economists. What it would mean when it comes to carbon emissions and climate change is that you would have a carbon tax set at the right level for throughout the world. And it would be the same tax. So, you know, anybody who emitted carbon would find that they had to pay for that, and the payment would reflect the marginal damage they were doing to the environment. So that would be a wonderful solution. And if you had that, a lot of the issues, if not all of the issues I'm talking about, would disappear. It's like in the infiltration example, it's like DuPont having to pay if it doesn't infiltrate, that $350 million would be levied on it. It would actually, through some sort of tax or regulation, it would actually pay that cost. And then, of course, knowing that, even a profit maximizer would say, of course, 19 million is cheap, to pay that if I avoid the $350 million penalty. I'm assuming that government hasn't done its job. And if you look at carbon taxes, and sadly that is the case, it's hard enough for a government in one country to pass a law that says, we're going to have a carbon tax at the appropriate rate, let alone to get coordination between governments in lots of different countries. So the background is that what I'm talking about here is in a world where governments haven't perfectly done their job. But everything, I don't want to suggest at all that the company action, socially responsible companies are going to solve all our problems. This is a sort of second best solution. It's extremely important that government starts doing stuff as well. And so I don't want to leave you with a message that we can sort of forget about government. No, government's crucial, but until government has sorted out the problem and come up with this worldwide carbon tax, then I think companies can be good, can do better. And what I've tried to argue today is that their owners may actually, as socially responsible people themselves, may actually want their companies to do better, and that in the future, I think we're going to be seeing more of that sort of thing going on. Okay, with that, let me thank you and stop.
Thank you, Professor Ha. Yeah, thank you, Professor Ha. Great presentation. I enjoy very much. This seems to me remind me the old day. Actually, I was you won Nobel Prize together with Professor Ben Holmstrom. Ben Holmstrom was my favorite faculty when I was doing my MIT PhD economics. And I actually went to your seminar too. so this is remind me kind of those old days, and I was there in earlier 2000s.
That's when you got your PhD.
Yeah, indeed, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
very
yes,
nice. Yes. Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of the Bangladesh, I would say Bangladesh intellectual community, Bangladesh government, for accepting this invitation. Secondly, I'd like to apologize for my being late. I was online 30 minutes ago, but in the last 5 minutes, I wasn't able to link, and I realized because I'm traveling in Middle East, all the data are blocked. WhatsApp call, Zoom are blocked. So, I learned it the hard way. But anyway, thank you. Appreciate great presentation. So first, I would like to ask whether the audience who have questions like to ask. Professor Atik, please.
Okay, yeah, yes, thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is, I mean, definitely the voice voting is extremely important, but will it be more effective for medium scale or smaller scale or giant companies? So this is the first part. What do you think about that? The strategies will be difficult and different, definitely. The second part is that the same strategies, I think, will be very much different, or I mean challenging for developing countries, or like if a regime is fascist or I mean autocrat. So on that case, the regulations or civil rights or regulations are not well organized or not proper. I mean, when civil rights is not strong, then many things, as you mentioned, like voting and the voice, are not that much hurt. So, and on that case, the ESG issues like, environmental issues, social and the corporate governance are also not stable. So what do you comment on that? Because I am a Bangladeshi, and Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, this region you can understand. So give some insight for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. You raised some important points there. I would say, first of all, I don't really think that it's going to be so different between giant companies and medium-sized companies. I think it clearly, if you have a private company, it's going to be there. You might have concentrated shareholders, and on the one hand, if you have a small number of shareholders, they can be more effective because what they say, you don't get the problem that for example, why should I even bother to vote, which could be an issue with large companies. With a very, someone who has 100 millionth of DuPont might say, the chances of my vote will matter are so small, why do I bother? This, by the way, is where the funds can be important. So BlackRock, which owns 5%, say, if they're voting on your behalf, then they are, of course, they have a significant impact. But anyway, I'm saying, I think putting that aside, though, if as soon as we move to public companies, with these diversified shareholders are going to own a small amount of that or a small amount of a large company. I'm not sure it makes that much difference to the argument. On your second point, I would say that two things. First of all, in a developing country, it could well be that the vote would end up differently. So I'm fully open to the possibility that when you're less well off, money matters more to you. To some extent, environmental stuff is a bit of a luxury good. So in my example, go back to DuPont and the incineration. That 19 million might loom much larger for a poor country. And, still 19 cents, it's a little hard to imagine that being terribly important. But, if we're talking about larger stakes, then, if you're poor, you might say, actually, I don't want to give up that amount of money, even though it improves the environment, because I just need the money, right? So that just says that maybe my conclusions about how the vote would turn out might be sensitive to the level of development of the country. That doesn't alter my view that the shareholders should be asked. So even though I sort of push the idea that we would get a socially efficient outcome, the more important thing for me is shareholder democracy. Why shouldn't they decide this? And maybe they'll decide we'll go for the profit maximizing strategy. So be it. It's a bit like a political election. I believe in political elections, even though I don't always like the results, but I believe in the process. And I think, that's what I'm saying here. When it comes to countries with somewhat autocratic governments, in a way, to the extent that one can vote at the corporate level, that may be a little bit of a substitute. At least, you can't influence the government as a whole because it's not very democratic, but you could perhaps, if you're allowed, you can do something at the company level.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Professor Hart, on behalf of most people who probably are not familiar with corporate finance, if the market is efficient, I think some may argue, if market efficient, the result from whether corporate manage the social responsible activity of individual would be the same. In fact, if we the individual manage, perhaps they would be preferred for the sake of freedom and autonomy. I think I heard actually somebody argue for that.
Sorry, I didn't. Could you just say that? I didn't quite understand that.
In terms of the engage with the socially responsible activities, whether the corporate manager or individual manage, they argue at the end of the day would be the same. And in fact, you probably prefer to that individual, in other words, shareholder manage the socially responsible activity for the sake of freedom and autonomy, instead of let the corporate manage it.
Yeah, I mean, if I understood you correctly, I think it's better for the shareholders to be deciding on these social things than for the manager. The manager is hired to make business decisions and, you know, to figure out what the options are. But when it comes to a social decision, and in fact, in my example, incineration had social consequences, or not incinerating had social consequences. This kind of trade-off, are we willing to give up some profit because it's good for society? This is the sort of thing that managers are not, in my opinion, in a particularly good position to decide. That's not why they were hired. And I think their decisions should reflect the social preferences of the shareholders on whose behalf they're meant to act. So that's my view. Rather than trying to insert their own social preferences, which might not exist. They may be not very social, but even if they were very social, it's not up to them. They're acting on behalf of other people.
Right.
Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. Any other people would like to ask questions or comment on Professor Hart's presentation? Or if I may, Professor Hart, for the exit, first of all, I kind of want to make a comment. In Bangladesh, as far as I understand, the notion of so-called investment or divestment is rather remote. Because as far as I know, I don't know about public university because I myself work for public university. We really do not have a very active management portfolio. So the notion is yeah.
The university.
So we are not really heavily indulged in terms of to have a available fund for management for doing investment.
So okay, yeah, okay. But as you know,
right.
In America and the UK, universities do have endowments.
Yes,
in America,
quite
big, very big.
Quite big.
Yeah, right. But in other places, not. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I think in Bangladesh, probably perhaps in the next couple of decades, but not now. For Professor Hart, for the you talk about exit versus voice. You in exit you mentioned about boycotting, protest, etc. Wouldn't it be easier for the shareholder simply just dump the stock? So wouldn't it be more direct than voicing? Because when it comes to voicing, they have to involve in meeting and debates and discussion and etc. So would they from a shareholder standpoint, from a direct incentive standpoint, the more direct is to just simply to exit, simply sell the stock, down the stock.
Well, my argument, so that's what I was trying to argue against in the second half of the talk, that the problem with that strategy is, yes, you can feel good. You know, you think, I'm now out of this dirty company. You know, I'm not holding oil stocks anymore. I'm not holding tobacco stocks. I'm not holding gun stocks, all this sort of stuff that you can, you know, then have a nice night of sleep, feeling good about yourself. But the trouble is, have you really had an impact? Because now what's happened is some hedge fund has bought your shares and, you know, I mean, the hedge fund may be less socially responsible than you. And so it may actually push these companies to double down and be even dirtier. That's the problem with the exit strategy. You may feel good, but you may end up having either no effect or even a negative effect. So that's why I think voice can be much more powerful. You stick, I mean, trying to persuade, to stick with companies and push them. Yes, it's somewhat costly, but it actually isn't, it's not as costly as it used to be, because these mutual funds can do it on your behalf, as I say, and they may even use this as a marketing strategy, as in the vote fund, where they say, look, we're going to be pushing, do you want to put your money with us? And then we'll push on your behalf. I think that's a better way to improve company behavior.
Right.
So Vincent, may I add?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I try to see who raised the hand. I could not see anything. So who is asking? I'm sorry.
Okay. My name is Atikur Ahad.
Okay,
yeah.
please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Regarding the last point, Oliver, I mean, I feel that we need education. Otherwise, I mean, it's very difficult to make a generation. I mean, even to concern about the voice issues, even not today, maybe after a decade or later on, because this problem will continue and continue, especially the ESG part and the, I mean, ESG for sustainable development. This kind of education should be incorporated in the, especially and this level, those who are going towards business, and also the policymakers from developing countries to the developed countries as well. In Japan, they have this in the elementary level up to a level, so that kids are growing in that mindset. But I'm not sure about other places that much, definitely not in the developing world. So how to do this kind of thing so that people can be aware of that? Any insight, please? Thank you.
Are you talking about, so education where, at school?
I mean, it's about,
Or
I mean,
business school?
Basically business school, but
yeah.
if possible,
yeah.
grassroots level, but especially in the business school on this policy, because I mean, the mindset is very important with huge examples, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Again, I'm glad you raised that, because that is very, very important. And I think the mindset has been significantly wrong for years now, because the mindset has been that, and people have been taught this, that company managers and mutual fund managers have a fiduciary duty, a duty of loyalty to their investors, and that has been interpreted to mean maximizing long-run financial return. That's what people have been taught, and so in a way, it justifies a lot of profit maximizing behavior. People can say, "This is what I'm meant to do because I've been told I'm a fiduciary. I'm acting on behalf of others, and they want a high financial return, and that's what I should be providing." Now, so that's the conventional wisdom. And what I've been trying to argue today is that that's wrong, because basically, as a fiduciary, as someone acting on behalf of others, I should actually ask them what they want, rather than just assuming that they want to maximize financial return. Because again, I'm always go back to the same example, the incineration example. That's an example where if I ask them, they might say, no, I don't want to, I want to give up the 19 cents for the 350 million. Please incinerate. But the mindset has been that actually the duty of management is just to look at the financial stuff, which would lead to not incinerating. So I think this is what we've been telling people for decades. And if we start telling them that, look, the world's more complicated. Yes, you should be acting on behalf of the owners, but you need to find out what they want, what trade-offs they're willing to make. Once we start telling people that, I may be naive. Some people would say, oh, you're incredibly naive. But I think maybe that will change behavior along the lines you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Professor Hall. We are running a few minutes beyond the schedule. So unless there is some burning question that from audience would like to ask Professor Hall, I will wait for 3 seconds. No? Okay, so Professor Hall, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for getting up early from your side. And I'd like to thank the audience and your attention and also the questions. So I'd like to conclude this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Professor Vincent Chang. On behalf of the conference committee, I would like to thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you again in the future.
I'm sorry, because I actually got myself ready 30 minutes ago already.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes it happens.
And then it turned out at the final second, after I tried to struggle to log in, and I realized I was told by my friend, Middle East, they block everything. And I'm traveling in Middle East right now, so I was not able to get on. I even have a very nice background screen. I all set up already, very clean. So you see right now I'm in dark. So I apologize for that.
Perfect. Yeah,
but I'm glad
it's wonderful. Yeah. It's great to have you, even though you are very busy. Yeah. It happens. Even
good.
Japan, people think that internet is seamless and excellent, but it happened that last 2 years because of Zoom. Sometimes I was talking and suddenly I disappeared, and it took a few seconds or moments to come back. So but it's a great talk, and thank you so much for your time to chair this session. Yeah, wonderful. Hope to see you again and have a safe journey back to Bangladesh. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Good night, Bangladesh, and good morning in North America. Take care. Bye bye.
Shamim Kaisar ki acho? Shamim Kaisar. So we close the session.
Yes, session can be closed. Atikat bhai, brother.
Okay. Yeah.
But actually, probably our session chair and professor already, keynote speaker leave already.
Yes. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey from the venue to home. This is number 1. Wash and take a shower before you go to bed. And see you tomorrow in the conference. And hope to enjoy all the sessions and talks. Yes. Thank you very much. Good night. It's midnight now. Purely midnight in Japan.